killer panel. I love panels like this. I wish we were in person, but we're not. We're virtual. And so we've got just an incredible group of folks. Ian, I'll kick it off to you to maybe introduce and get us started.
Yeah, I'd love to lob the first question out. I'm not going to go around to everyone because you can read it right there. But I've got a question from the audience from Jesse at TrustWave. What should a customer consider when looking and shopping for a security partner?
Oh, hey, Ian, thank you. No, it's a great question. There's no shortage of things to shop for out there as far as security products and solutions and things that we as the vendors in this marketplace are marketing out to try to solve different problems. And there's really no shortage of problems for us to try to solve. So there's a lot to consider as the leaders of the security programs, these organizations are trying to sort through and decide what are the different things that are going to have the highest impact for their business. It takes evaluating what's your risk appetite, what's the appropriate spend for your business, for the industry that you're in, and landing eventually somewhere along this security maturity curve, if you will, that we're showing here on the screen. So, most organizations are trying to advance their security programs. Still, none of us have arrived at perfect security. So, being able to continually evolve what you have and build upon the things that you've already invested in becomes a critical part of your decision-making process as you're making those decisions. And ultimately, you're looking for the things that are going to have an impact, the stuff that's going to help you actually mitigate risk, stop threats from spreading in your environment, help you get visibility in those environments, and things that you can use that won't just sit on the shelf.
Nice, thanks, Jesse.
I love that. And I will say too, Jesse, all of us love this particular slide that Alex had up too. And for all of those that are listening, we are the ones that can help you get to that far right. And it's just a great template for every customer to really decide where they're at on this particular graph and where they want to go and how the trusted advisor can help with that. And one way that we can all help you with that is things like MDR. We've got one of the top MDR providers in the world on here, Alert Logic. Jack, my man, back-to-back webinars, buddy. Listen, if you could, you are the godfather of MDR, in my opinion. At least to me, you are, okay? If you could you talk a little bit about what MDR is, how you guys are doing it differently, how it's hard for a company that's listening to do it on their own. And I'll get another question after that. That's a good way to start.
No worries, Drew. Thanks a million. Listen, I know that you and Ian and the gang at Avant are big data people, right? So I come armed with some stats, interesting stats,
nice.
Good take home for the audience.
Like it.
So we know that 94% of enterprises are operating in the cloud. Okay, number one. Number two, 90% of enterprises in the cloud are concerned with security. All right. Number three, 84% of organizations operating in the cloud believe that their traditional security tools cannot support them in the new environment. So you do your Jack Danahy math, and that tells you that 79% of organizations are in the cloud and believe their existing tools can't help them.
Wow.
So why MDR, right? Well, the idea here is that the environment's changing. And the risks in security, I mean, it was fantastic to listen to Leslie walk through a lot of her own personal experience with it. They're changing as well. The nature of the threat surface has expanded like a balloon skin, right? It started off when I moved into the cloud, right? Cloud platforms are very secure, but my responsibility and a shared responsibility model says, I got to do some more. And then we have the current situation with all the work from home. And just think about the skin of that balloon getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what happens as it gets broader, it's going to be weaker, right? And you're going to find ways in which to penetrate that attack surface that are new. And so I think that one of the reasons that things like MDR and basically the capacity of trusted advisors to help people understand these problems is because it's changing so rapidly. The threats change, the environment changes. We're trying to find the right ways to help people protect themselves, understanding their business. It says you want to go to somebody who's done this before, that maybe has seen thousands of other companies. Maybe one of them is just like yours, who understand how to approach this problem. So I think, Drew, I think the combination of MDR and trusted advisors, that capacity to contextualize security to the way businesses run and the way threats are changing, I really think that that's probably the way in which we get home from here.
Yeah, it's funny. We have all these great questions written down. We did all this great research before we came here to talk to you guys. And I could just like throw that out the window because I could talk to you guys about this like all day long. And I've been binge watching Mr. Robot, by the way. Mm-hmm. So if Sam, if you're listening, literally binge watching. One of the coolest things that when you watch Mr. Robot, for everybody that's on here and that's in the industry, is all of the acronyms and the different things that they're using on the show. And they're like, we do that for a living. And it's like really cool to see, right? And one of the things that I thought was so interesting about it was how they were talking about honeypots, and they were talking about the managed security providers, and they were talking about all these different ways to penetrate these companies. And it's interesting because I was thinking about when Leslie was talking about it and Ray was talking about it, the AI and the human element. You guys are the AI and the human element. You are the honeypot. You are doing the things that really no company, no actual enterprise company should or is doing today when it comes to security. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting point you bring up, and I'd actually written a note about that because I think that there's this combination of a point that Leslie made and a point that you and Ray both brought up, right? Which is, Leslie's point was that nothing detects a human better than a human does, right?
Yeah.
And the question that you and Ray were wrestling with a little bit was, what's the role of AI? How far can AI take us? And, our experiences, right? So we've got thousands of customers over decades. And what AI is an enabler of making those humans faster and better and smarter, because what the AI can do is it can recognize things you worry about. Managed detection and response is all about being really rapid about the way in which I recognize something going wrong or a new threat arriving on the scene. And so AI can be a way in which to focus the lens, to focus the light on the area of the most risk and take best advantage of those scarce people like Leslie, who really know how to do the job, who know how to dig in and find the conclusion that you need. And so for me, this evolution of it, right, this evolution of both AI and really ML, right, to recognize patterns specifically for some of these things, applying that in the context of making those humans better and smarter, I think that's a really big part of it. And to your point, Drew, understanding that across thousands of customers, it's a level of insight that even the really best, the best run, the most well-funded individual organizations just not going to be able to touch because they're not going to get the heterogeneity of the information flow you're going to see across many.
And I'm going to
let's take that question over to Leslie right now. Why don't we have her respond back to your position on that? I mean, she's on the other side of the fence. I'm curious if she would agree.
So, absolutely. So yeah, absolutely. You need to have those tools there. Okay. So yes, I agree with Ray. AI is totally a buzzword, and what we're really using is ML, and it's a tremendously useful tool for our people. It's super useful. We use it all the time. We use all these security tools. We use logging. We use data sources. We use security tooling, and they're all really important, but they don't take the place of security analysts who are human beings.
Yeah, and I would also add that, the most basic things in the world from a hygiene standpoint will make companies safer. So we all know multi-factor authentication, if properly implemented, will stop a huge amount of the attacks that are out there. We also know that the vast majority of Americans are reusing their same passwords on all the sites that they use, and that when credentials get stolen, it kind of throws everything else out the window, so to speak. So there are some things that are super complex that we need to be thinking about, but there's also quite a few things that are not super complex.
Let's bring Chris into the conversation. Chris Smith from Centurylink. He's Vice President of Product Management. I think the last stat I heard a while ago is Centurylink, almost 70% of the world's internet is on your backboard. So you have a shit ton to secure. What is your position? I don't think you have a brand around security, but I know you got a lot of knowledge and a lot of interesting products. Can you break that down for what you're doing?
Sure. So we actually have a bigger security practice than we're given credit for. For us, it comes in a few different lenses. Because we are one of the largest peered IP networks on the planet, we have a ton, or a shit ton, as you said, of data that we can mine and look for actionable insights. So we branded a couple of years ago our threat intel practice. It's called Black Lotus Labs. And what they do all day long and every day is they look at our internet backbone for malware and those C2s and those egregious threats. And we look for actionable insights. We use honeypots, we use automation. I won't use AI or machine learning, but we use automation, and we do a few things with that. The first thing that we do is we protect our network on behalf of our customers. I believe that over time, our customers are going to expect us to deliver threat-free traffic as part of providing an ISP service, and we're investing for that eventuality. The second thing we do is if we see really egregious threats, we will just take them off the internet. And we think that philosophy is unique to CenturyLink. So if the worst threats out there are impacting numbers of our customers, we'll either black hole them off the internet, or we'll work with whatever ISP is hosting them to get them taken down.
So Chris, is that like a counterattack? You sense the issue, then you're going after and taking it out versus just blocking?
We just take them right off the network. And then on top of that, we use automation and we create services that we use to protect our customers. So somebody made the comment earlier that security is really hard. What we're trying to do is make it simple. And for us, simple means it's an ingredient of the other things that we sell. And Centurylink at its core is a network and IT services company. So my job is to build security into all of the other things that we sell. So if you're buying SD-WAN or you're buying Cloud Edge, you're not coming and having a conversation 5 minutes later on, well, what security goes along with that? It's kind of built in. So we built a practice at the beginning of the year that's kind of unique, built on top of our threat intel practice that we call rapid threat defense. And what it does, and customers have the ability to kind of tune it the way they like, is if we see a threat on the network that we're sure about, we will push a policy to any edge that we manage on their behalf, whether it's a firewall on the cloud, on the prem, on the edge, or it's our DDoS practice, or it's an SD-WAN device, and we will proactively block that threat on their behalf. So the philosophy is to make it as simple as we can for our customers to use our insights and automation to block threats proactively and to make security an ingredient of everything else.
Nice, great, really interesting.
Yeah, and I'll hop up next, and this one's for Curtis, and Curtis, since the the crisis, I went from 29,000 miles on a plane in 5 weeks to 0, to stuck to my office, stuck to the basement. And I have probably used every single unified communications platform on the planet. Now, I'm not here to talk about which one I like the best, although I will say I love your product, absolutely love it, we all do. But I have a really important question that sounds probably pretty simple, but it's not. When it comes to how you log on, is it browser-based or app-based that you love better? And which one is safer from a security perspective? Because I can tell you, I have done all of the above.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There are benefits to both. I think when you start getting into authentication, and what we're looking at, caution, forward-looking statement, looking into is more verification beyond authentication. So we've got this concept of authentication, but is that really who they say they are? So we're really looking at this verification part as being a part of the experience as well. But the web versus, it really depends on how you implement it. If you weekly present your web presence and you make it easy to get through, or you do ridiculously simple two-factor authentication, or you make mistakes like adding a phone number post a single-factor authentication to your multi-factor source without doing additional questioning, then that web experience is certainly less than what you would probably get out of an application experience. Now, what we really look for is going to the corporate entity and leveraging what their policies are as a company. So we do SAML integration, so we can go to their authentication, and we work with companies like Okta or ADFS in the Microsoft world, and we go, let's leverage one of these authentication platforms and put your communications platform behind it. just a few years ago, nobody did this. Like, we say this now and everybody's like, duh, I get it. I see faces. I got it. Wow, this is probably the least exciting point of the whole day. But we didn't do this just a few years ago. Like, here we are now, and now we can tie into the authentication scheme of the practice. So what does that do? That elevates the business's requirement to own some of their own responsibility and security. They can't just, if it's in the cloud, I'm good, wipe it off, sign my little note, did my threat assessment, put that piece of paper and into my boss, I won't lose my job, I'm good. No, you've got to make sure the things that you put around it, your data leakage prevention, how you integrate things, your HR policies, your training. Don't click on links, don't click on links, don't click on links. We can say them every time. And we talked about earlier how they're, even the most seasoned people are clicking on them. So that authentication scheme, get it right, integrate it in there, and then you don't have to worry too much about whether RingCentral got it right or not. But I'm definitely open to be inspected.
Nice, awesome. All right, I'm going to take this over to Josh. Josh, with the release of the recent report and all that you see from your perspective and the doom and gloom we hear about, are there any positive stories out there? Can you kind of bring us into that motion, some positive energy back to this?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a comment I get a lot about the DBIR. It's all doom and gloom, and it's really sort of a story about failures, right? But in that, I think, and the fact that we've been doing this for 13 years, I think allows us to measure not only those nefarious data points, but we could also look at what are the defenders doing right. And there are, I think, some positive stories to tell. I think the first one is just the fact that more and more organizations are talking about this stuff, right? So we're seeing more participation in the C-suite. We're seeing tabletop exercises and breach simulations that are happening where people are practicing responding to cybersecurity incidents. So I think just from an awareness perspective, that's a really positive story. The other thing is we're seeing a lot of organizations are getting better at detecting these things, right? So I think there's a huge focus on the prevention, right? What tools are we putting at the perimeter, the AV solutions, all of those things. And in the past, there was less focus on how do we detect when something does happen, right? So Drew made a point about it's not a matter of if, it's when. You'll hear that at every cybersecurity conference. So in those situations where the threat actor does circumvent those security tools, where they leverage social engineering to get into your environment, you have to be really good at detecting those incidents. And while we still are a little bit behind the curve in terms of, threat actors are getting in within seconds or minutes, and it's still taking us days or weeks, one of the things we highlight is that a vast majority of incidents are being detected in days now. So that's a really positive thing. And we're seeing organizations get better at responding to those. And then on the topic of social engineering, we are always looking at click rates, right? And a few years ago, the click rate for phishing emails was somewhere around like 25%, right? So really high. So that has come down overall. I think this year's stat was most organizations that are around an average of 3% click rate. Now, on the flip side of that, to bring it back to the doom, we are seeing an increase in social engineering emails that are going out, right? So, 25% of 100,000 emails was 25,000. If we're at 3% of a million, we're at 30,000. But overall, I think it's important that we're focusing on the fact that we are bringing those numbers down and we're getting better at detecting and then ultimately responding to those incidents.
And Josh, I actually just wanted to jump in on that because Ian at the very beginning of the webinar said the phrase, some idiot grabs a USB stick and plugs it in. We don't really talk about users like that anymore because attacks have gotten so good that everybody falls for them, like everybody. Even Chris Haggerty, who's like the founder of the social engineering CTF village in DEF CON, has fallen for it. And at my own company, we fish our own employees, and I've clicked the wrong things before. So really, as security professionals, we need to be focusing on making it so that the users don't have an opportunity to click them at all, right? Of course, user education is important, but the perception that the user is somehow dumb for clicking things or for plugging things in, I think that's a little bit outdated, no offense, Ian.
Well, Ray, if it makes you feel better, I was the first employee ever to click on a phishing link at a bot, which happened 5 years ago.
Okay, good. That does make you feel better. Well, you're not an idiot for clicking it.
And I know that I know the audience is stunned that it wasn't me, but it wasn't me. So to that point, I can assure you that every single company that's listening needs help, and that's not something bad. It's just a fact. And when I think about it, Jesse, I'm going to go to you at TrustWave for a second. We have built a pretty unbelievable partnership with you guys. We are seeing a tremendous amount of success, but there's a reason behind it. But it's something that still boggles my mind. The MSSP movement is still in its infancy. Not enough people know it exists, right? And if you look at that slide where on the far right is the ultimate scenario, but not enough people are there yet. And so I really kind of want to introduce you to TrustWave a little bit and talk about what people are missing. Because if you looked in our 612 report, you'll notice that SOC services, for instance, were one of the things that most of the companies that responded to said they just didn't have. You guys, with, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, 9 SOCs around the world, 200 white hat hackers, 200 black hat hackers, and the ability to recruit some of the best human intelligent people to come in and then mimic that with ML and everything else that you're doing, but with all the global services that you have, puts you in a unique position. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, Drew. Now, I do think most of our hackers, well, all of them should be white hat hackers, although we do research and such that can have them put on a great persona from time to time. But yeah, I mean, so TrustWave has been around for a little over 20 years. A little over, let's say, maybe 6 years ago, we decided we wanted to be a cybersecurity focused leader in the managed security services space. And so we made a lot of specific investments to help organizations out there achieve some of those goals and overcome some of those challenges that you mentioned in your 612 report. Gaining 24/7 visibility to an environment to be able to detect and stop threats quickly before they can, spread within the environment, have a big impact is a huge part of that. But MSSPs are also changing. I mean, we have been around as an industry for close to 20 years. My first SOC analyst job was 19 years ago, sitting in front of a monitor and looking at logs from wheel group IDS devices. So there's a certain trend to where we want to be more proactive and not just detecting things, but also responding. So if you could read Jack's poster behind him all about MDR, there's a big movement in this industry. Thank you, Jack, which is going through from not just managing security stuff and helping to do monitoring, but actually to where we can take action, be proactive, integrate threat research with the things that we're doing for our customers to round out and help them achieve things that they certainly couldn't do on their own, and then take specific actions in their environment, whether it's at the network or in clean pipe or using external dynamic lists or on endpoints, taking actions to help stop threats in their tracks and eradicate them. That's really where we're moving as the company, and I think where a lot of the industry is moving as well.
Nice, Jesse. That's a great answer. All right, so just to give everyone a heads up, I think we got 3 to 4 minutes before Sam comes up, so I got a couple more questions left. I'm going to go back to Chris at Centurylink. Chris, have you heard of this notion that cars can go faster if they have good brakes? How does that apply to our space right now? I'd love to get your opinion.
That's actually really relevant. So we talked a little bit earlier about applications moving to the cloud. We have large companies coming to us right now saying, we've tried to run these applications in the cloud. They're not performing the way that we expect, whether it's robotics or whether it's self-driving cars or HD video. And it doesn't make sense for us for scale reasons to put them on-prem. So can you help us? And what we're focused on right now, we've made a big investment publicly on a cloud edge, and we're taking about 150 or so of what would have been our legacy voice COs, those brick buildings you see in residential neighborhoods and around strip malls, and we're turning them into mini cloud data centers. And the idea is we're focused on a secure application experience, and there's dozens of use cases that we're sort of teasing out with customers. But at the end of the day, we think about security as creating an application experience. Part of it is acceleration. And we've got capabilities that include containerized CDN. And then part of that is security. But at the end of the day, I think applications are going to be more distributed over time, some of which will sit on the prem, some of which will sit closer to the things that need to consume them, and some of them will be in the cloud. And that makes this this whole space a little more complicated than it is today.
Nice, interesting. Now, Jack, a little birdie told me that was your phrase, right? How do you think he answered that? Do you agree? Are you on the same page?
Yeah, I definitely think the investments in Centurylink are making are going to help people to do a better job. And I've always believed, and I'm sure that people like Leslie and Ray, we spend all of our time worrying about security. And the reason we do it is not because we're always, frightened or scared. It's because we want people to be able to take advantage of the new tech, be able to do great things for others. You watch the work that people do to support organizations for people in need, and they need good security, right? So yeah, we want to build the best break so they can go as fast as hell.
Nice, awesome. I love that. It's so fun. All right, I'm going to close this out with one last question to Leslie. I've gotten some version of this from the audience a few times now, so here it goes. As customers' budgets are impacted by COVID and priorities shift, what would you say is the most critical thing an organization should allocate budgets for in regards to their security posture? What should they invest in?
Yeah, so asset inventory first, know what's on your network, and good security hygiene. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but you can't do any of these other things. You can't deploy these wonderful technologies. You can't get people in your environment finding threats until you know what you have and how it's set up and how to secure it. That's step one. And a lot of organizations buy security tools and buy security services without having an understanding of even how their network is architected. So get out there, find out what's out there, do architecture assessments, architecture reviews, and capture traffic and understand what you're dealing with first.
Awesome. Well, I got to wrap the panel. You guys were incredible. Thanks so much for your time. What a talented group of people.